Welcome everyone to our webinar today discussing inventory and how you can be in control. We are thrilled that you have joined us for this webinar, and we want you to feel free to reach out with any questions at any time using the Q&A or chat features. After the webinar, we will send out an email to all participants with the slides attached, but please allow about 48 hours for that email to arrive. Today, I am pleased to introduce Sandy Wickman as our presenter. Sandy is a Microsoft GP certified expert with over 25 years of experience in implementing Microsoft Dynamics GP and Business Central solutions. She has a record of client successes in diverse verticals such as manufacturing, reverse manufacturing, banking, technology, gaming, professional services, retail sales, and nonprofits. She was one of the first implementation experts to earn the Dynamics Credentialed Professional Certification. Sandy's experience also includes Dynamics BC, with experience in several of the core competencies of this platform. She enjoys helping GP clients bridge the gap between what they are used to with Dynamics GP and the functionality they would use with Business Central. Sandy also excels in all aspects of successful implementations, from business process reviews, configurations, customizations, reporting, and much more. This foundation, combined with over 40 years of experience in the business world, present a perfect position from which to consult business owners and professionals on finding solutions and business processes that they are comfortable with. Sandy's experience with change management training also provides a unique complement to business systems acumen. Please join me in welcoming Sandy as our speaker for Inventory. You can be in control. And Sandy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Margaret. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have the opportunity to speak with you today. So let's just take a quick look at what we're going to cover in our agenda. And then we're going to spend a good deal of our time actually in the GP application, looking at several different sections related specifically to inventory. So we're going to start with some valuation methods and costing impacts. And then we're going to ask some questions, some tough questions. How do we make inventory more accurate? And how do we find it when it does go wrong? We'll look at a few inquiries and utilities, and then we'll come back to our slide deck at the end to look at some features that have been added or refined in the most recent releases. So, I find it funny that everything seems to be going towards steps these days. Like, we talk about the numbers of steps that are actually necessary to make 10 flights of stairs, or what happens to your body when you walk those 10,000 steps, and what's our basic dance steps, right? Everything's steps related. So I just thought it would be kind of fun to take this from a perspective of steps, steps, steps. So our first 4 steps, we're going to talk about valuation methods and costing impacts. And those 4, we'll start with decimals, units of measure, landed costs, and valuation methods. And there's actually 5, not 4. All right, so let's jump over into GP and talk about those 4 steps. First one we're going to talk about is decimals. So I'm in my inventory area page here in the cards section, and I'm going to start with an item card. The item we're going to look at in part today is called silicone. This silicone item is actually a part of the floor stock class of items. Classes give us an opportunity not only to filter and refine data for lookups and groupings, but it also gives us an opportunity to roll out basic defaults to groups of items as we create them. And some of those defaults include the quantity decimals, the currency decimals, and that was our first topic. So in this case, the quantity decimals for this particular item is 5. That means that I can transact in this item with up to as much as 5 decimal places. So pretty significantly small numbers if you needed to do that. Now, the next decimal, though, that we see here is currency decimals, and that's actually grayed out. So we're going to talk about currency decimals in a second. The quantity decimals of 5 must match the quantity decimals on the unit of measure schedule. So if I'm looking at this schedule called compound and drill back into it, what I see is that this decimal places must match this decimal places. So very often, when you're looking at the unit of measure schedule ID, we may even include in that the number of decimal places. So if you had eaches, and some of those eaches had the ability to have decimals, you might have each dash one for one decimal or each dash five for five decimals. That makes it easy to be able to see the number of decimal places to match up with new items. Now, this particular unit of measure schedule has a number of different things in it. The base unit of measure is ounce, which means that it needs to be the first line on my unit of measure schedule. So I'm saying 1 ounce is equal to 1 ounce. And then I can use that ounce equivalent to make as many other different sorts of equivalents as I choose to. For instance, 128 ounces in a gallon, 32 ounces in a quart. For quarts, notice that now once the quart has been identified, I can use the quart equivalent to get back to new gallons. The two I wanted to focus most on today are the 16 tube and the 30 tube. So we're going to look at how we can keep those tubes from ever being able to transact in anything less than a full tube, right? So if you have a tube of silicone, it's 16 ounces of silicone, and it can't be split up into smaller units than that. It is a tube. However, in that tube case of 16, I can do either ounces or I can do 16 tubes. So we're going to look at that a little bit more in just a moment. Focus for the moment is decimal places of 5 matches our decimal places of 5 here. Now, within my purchasing options for this particular item, I can go to the Go To button and go to the purchasing. And in this window, I can see that I have set for my default purchasing unit of measure to be gallons. So it doesn't have to be the base unit. I can say that typically I buy it in gallons, but most often I might sell it in a different unit of measure, and we'll look at that in a moment. So in this base down here, I have the opportunity to say whether those can be purchased in whole or fractional units. So this is where I'm controlling to say my 16 tube can only be bought in whole units. Some of the others, like quarts and gallons, may be able to be in whole or fractional. We're going to put that into practice here. The other thing I wanted to mention though is this revalue inventory for cost variance. So it's an important thing to note whether or not you want cost variances to go back and impact the cost of your inventory at the time that the cost changes. An example of that might be if you negotiated with a vendor and they were going to sell you an ounce of silicone for 6 cents, and when you got the actual invoice, it was 0.65, so a half cent more. Do you want that inventory in your inventory to be recosted based on that variance? In my case, because it's marked, it's yes. And because the tolerance percent is set to 0, it's at any level of tolerance. So that means any percentage will automatically go back and revalue my inventory for me. Okay. On the sales side, if I go to that Go To and go to my price lists, I have the ability to set a selling unit of measure, right? So it can be any of the ones that are on the unit of measure schedule. So if I typically sell in ounces, I can leave that. And then on the same price list, I can set price levels and prices based on any or all of those units of measure so that I have it available to default into my transactions on the sales side. Okay. So we really covered two things there. We covered decimals and we covered the unit of measures, which was two of the top ones on our list. Let's see. We're going to process a purchase order for our silicone now. So I'm going to go to the purchasing area page. into the purchase order entry, and I'm going to place a standard purchase order. I do have myself set up as a buyer, so I can select myself. We're just going to purchase today from our Fabricam vendor, and the item I'm going to select is that silicone item. You'll notice when I tab off the item number that the unit of measure defaults into this window, and it's defaulting as gallon. The reason is because of that setting where we told it that that's the default purchasing unit of measure. Then I'm going to indicate how many gallons I'd like to purchase. And I'll place this into my warehouse site ID. I'm going to purchase one more of those, but this time I want to purchase the silicone in tubes. I want to buy some 32-ounce tubes. And I'm going to put 12.5 in that field. Now, that being a decimal place, what I hope you'll see is that you can't purchase fractional units for this unit of measure. So because of the way we set up our purchasing, we can't buy anything less than whole units for a unit of measure called tubes. Okay? So it's one of the ways that we can help users to be sure that they're selecting the right things, because we're enforcing some rules around what the unit of measure will allow. Now, just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and just include one other item. And these are some mats that I buy from this vendor. And those are going to the warehouse as well. Now, this item is a non-inventory item. The way that I can validate that is I open the blue expansion button here, and down here in the item type, it shows that this is a non-inventoried item. That means that it's not in my item list, and it's not something that I'm going to count or be able to stock in units. I'm just going to buy it. So where do you think the 0 decimal places came from for my mats item, which is non-inventory? So let's go take a quick look. So I'm going to go into my inventory setup. I think I must have had myself in my notes. I'm going to look at my purchasing setup instead. Purchase order setup, where I have non-inventoried items and the default number of decimal places of that quantity is 0. I can pick anything from 0 to 5, and that will be the way that the default shows up for my non-inventoried items in any purchase order that I place for any vendor. Okay. So I have 3 line items here. We're on purchase order 2087. Let me make a note of that, so we probably come back to that one. Okay, the next thing on our list for those 4 steps was landed cost. So I'm going to look up our purchase order number 2075. Okay, very similar. We purchased from Fabricam, silicone items. This first line item, when I open the line expansion, I see here a thing called a landed cost group ID. So landed cost is a method of being able to add costs to inventory items based on other external costs that may impact that item. So typical ones we see are overseas freight, national freight, duties, tariffs, right? So we're all kind of familiar lately with additional costs on things because of tariffs. All of those things can be added together into what's called a landed cost group, and that group can be added to either purchase orders or in transit transfers. So if you're moving goods from one warehouse location to another, you also have the ability to add this kind of cost to these items. Now, when you do this, the costs of that item are increased by the elements or the individual landed costs that rolled up into the group. In this case, I have a duty, and that duty is a flat amount for $200 for each time I purchase from this vendor. And I have overseas shipping, which is a percent of the extended cost, which is 12%. So I can group them together and actually have both of those costs impact this particular purchase. So landed cost has a couple of different ways you can implement it and some really deep, rich functionality for those of you who are wanting to be sure that your inventory in your system is adequately reflecting not only the cost of the inventory, but any of the additional costs. So we won't go any farther into detail about that, but certainly want to offer our services at LBMC. If landed cost is something that you'd like to dig deeper into, we would love to be able to work with you on what your options are and how you can use that functionality. Okay, then I'm going to jump back to my silicone item here, and we're going to look at the valuation methods. So this silicone item has a valuation method of FIFO perpetual. And you'll notice that once that item is created, this field is grayed out. There are utilities that you can use to change a valuation method for an item after it's begun being used, but we often suggest that you be sure you talk with your CPAs and such, because changing valuation methods often requires an agreement from your audit or your controlling entities about changing those valuations prior to that taking place. So I'm going to clear the screen here so that I can show you when I make a new item, I get to choose between any one of 5 valuation methods. So FIFO, first in, first out, LIFO, last in, first out, and then I can choose between perpetual and periodic, which is standard cost, actual and standard, and the 5th choice is average perpetual. Um, so this really speaks to how inventory will be added to your environment and subtracted based on first in or last in, and then whether it's actual cost, in which case things like those landed costs will actually impact the cost as you look at the actuals, or standard, in which case it will impact your variance in between standard and the actual cost in the landed cost updates. All right, let's jump back to our PowerPoint and see where we're going to go next. So if we're talking then about inventory accuracy, once we get things set up right, steps 5 through 8 help us to keep things right and look at ways that we can keep things right. So we're going to start with sites, both virtual and physical. We'll talk about reason codes, in-transit transfers, and then number 8, not allowing any overrides. Really important point. Okay. So back to our GP, we're going to start with sites. So staying here on my inventory area page in the cards section, I'll pick site. And I have a whole long list of different sorts of things for my sites. Some of these, like this technician site, is an example of where you could potentially create sites for a technician's service truck. So if you have service people that come into your warehouses and pick up repair parts before they leave for their technician's day on the road, we could actually put those quantities of goods into that technician's truck. And then at the end of the day, would be able to evaluate or inventory what they bring back and would know what they used in different service tickets and would know exactly where we would be able to find our inventory because we sent it out on a truck, so we know we can't count it. A good example of a virtual site might be quarantine. So this site I've created does not have an address. It doesn't have a physical location. It's I can quarantine anything in any location by adding it into this site. Now, I also have at the bottom here an account segment ID of my division set to 999. So what that means is it may still be in my inventory and I can roll up my inventory general ledger, but my division segment of my chart of accounts would change each time I put anything into this site ID so that it would still show inventory for the main account, but would show a different division for anything that's been quarantined. So a really nice way to be able to identify within your financial reports how you've got some inventory that's quarantined, which might mean that it's not available for use. Maybe it's being dispositioned as a quarantined item until it passes inspection, and then it can be moved into actual inventories with a site transfer. All right, so, and then obviously I have a number of other site IDs like the main site and the South store, right? I also, in my case, have a couple of others like TWO returns. So if I'm going to have things that I'm going to return to vendors or that were returned to me by customers, I may want them segregated until they get inspected or until I get the paperwork done. And then I also have the potential for having things, some of my inventory, my owned inventory, out at vendor locations. So it's another way that you can use your site IDs to keep track of inventory costs for things that you own and need to be able to see in separate locations. All right, so next we had reason codes. Reason codes are one of those things that have been added in later versions of GP and are super helpful. They're really useful. So I'm in the setup section of inventory, and I'm going to go to my reason code setup first and talk about how they're structured. Then we'll see them in action. So in my reason codes, I have a number of them already set up. So I've got some in-transit transfers, some lot expirations, some scrap. So a variety of reasons that inventory transactions might take place. So I'm going to start with scrap and talk about what the additional choices are. So within this square, I get to decide what sort of inventory transactions I can use this reason code for. Right? I can use it on variances and adjustments, but scrap would typically only ever be for decreases. I'm only taking scrap out. So by setting this, someone couldn't pick the scrap reason code and do an increase to inventory. The best part about reason codes is I get to tell it what the default offset account is. So right here, I'm telling it that scrap, when I pick this reason code, is always going to go to shrinkage and waste. And then the lower part gives me the opportunity to look at whether there's transfers available for this reason code. So I don't typically want to transfer scrap from one place to another. It's usually just a transaction. But you can see here, I have a whole variety of other things that I can look at and use as a part of these, right? Including some in-transit transfers, which is where we're going to go next. So in-transit transfers is an ability to be able to transfer things from one of your owned locations to a different of your owned locations that may have uh, a an amount of time during which you want to be sure that you can keep track of your inventory. So, for example, if I was trucking things from the eastern United States to the western United States, it may take a few days to get there. Well, I want to be sure that I can keep track of where my inventory is, so I may use in-transit transfers. The other thing that I like about using in-transits is that the people who are receiving the goods on the receiving end, they get the opportunity to do a standard receipt of goods to show that it actually was received, right? So they don't have to change their processes. They can do a standard receipt with one switch setting changed to be able to do these. So in-transit transfers used to be a part of the field service modules. It's now here in inventory in my transactions pane. And I'm going to create a new one. So it defaults to today's date. My system date is in the year 27. By default, I'm saying move things from the warehouse. And in this case, I'm going to move them to my, I believe, North Store. Yep, North Store. I'm going to use a via site. That means in between here and there, where will I find that inventory? So I have an in-transit site set up where I'll be able to see my goods as they move through this process. Then I can pick my shipping method, got some addresses, and then I go about putting my items on my in-transit transfer. So we know we've got some silicone items in my warehouse. When I click on the looking glass for my reason codes, you'll notice that only 2 of them show up, and that scrap is not one of my options. And that's because I set up my reason code in such a way that it supports making good choices in this window. Okay, so I'm doing a transfer of using the in-transit transfer reason code, and I'll do 10 ounces. I do have the opportunity to do a separate pick activity. So if you need someone to go to your warehouse and take these 10 ounces off the shelf and stage them for the shipping, you can do a separate pick activity. In my case, I've got it set up to just automatically do the pick. I can add landed cost to this. So I mentioned that you can, if you're transporting these things, and once they get to the North Warehouse, I want them to have the additional cost of me moving them to that location. I can do that by creating a landed cost group ID and selecting it in this line. And I also then have the ability to check on my distributions for the accounting folks in the room, right? So you'll notice here that my inventory is just going from the same inventory count to a different one because it's really just transferring. So it's still my inventory. It still should be in those dollars. It just goes in and out of the same GL account. Okay. I do have the opportunity to print some documents. So if I need to print a packing slip to go along with what I'm sending to my North location so they know what they should expect, I can print a packing slip. And then once I'm ready, the person who's doing the shipment would come in here and actually click the ship button to show that they are doing the shipment along with some other journals that might be available. Okay. So there's my document number, what I'm shipping, where it's going from and through in transit to my North location. Okay. So any of you who want to maintain quantities and visibility as you're moving things from one place to another, you may consider in-transit transfers. I want to show you then that once it is received in my North location, I go to my purchasing area page to the receiving transaction entry. And the only difference is in this type, I'm going to pick the in-transit inventory, which means that now instead of looking for POs or receipts, I'm looking up transfers in my line items. So when I click this looking glass, I can see that the last one that I did, this one, can now be received for my silicone item. So the people in the North location can do a standard receiving transaction when they receive it by only changing the type ID, and it supports them in selecting the 10 that they did receive on that in-transit transfer, and they can now post that. Okay. All right, the last one in this section was regarding overrides. So on my inventory area page, in my inventory control setup, these boxes in this section about allowing overrides should be heavily considered in your environment. So what we're saying here is that we are not allowing the inventory to go negative based on any of these three types of transactions: adjustments, variants, or transfers, right? So most often we recommend that you never have these boxes checked. The only exception is if in the case of a transfer, you need to be able to transfer something to another location or another site ID after it's been on an in-transit transfer or something. You may choose to let the transfer overrides continue so that you can do the next step before you do the prior step. But that's in very rare circumstances. Most often, all of these boxes should be unmarked, which will keep you from allowing your inventory to go negative. Okay, pretty important. All right, let's go see where we are on our slides. Now, we've set our inventory up right. We've done some things to make sure our transactions are good. Now, how do we know where it is, right? So we're going to look at ATP, which is available to promise, HITB, which is historical inventory trial balance. We'll look at allocations, and then an inventory all in one view. Okay. So back to my GP. In my inventory section, in the inquiry, I have this option of available to promise. So this is a very underutilized functionality, I think. Um, I think probably the place that it is often used most effectively is for someone who's maybe doing sales orders or sales quotes, where they need to know the availability of products and be able to do so in a really quick way, see what they have, when there might be some more coming, right? So I'm going to use the 100 XLG item in this case. And on this item, I want to look at the warehouse location. So at the top part of the window, I see I have 29 of them on hand. 5 of them have already been allocated to a different sales order, which means that I have 24 available. Plus, I can see I have a free forward of 34. That means my available plus what I see down here is an additional 10 that's going to be available to me on April 21st. My date is April 12th. I have pending inventory receipts. Sorry, yes, pending inventory receipts of 10. I would also see if there were PO receipts and sales documents, right? A bunch of different things. So if I was in a position of a salesperson and I needed to say, when will I be able to get more than 24? I need 30. So I can come down at the bottom, put in a quantity of 30, and before I tab off of there, notice that the calc available and the dates are clear right now. And when I say I need 30, calculate the available date, it tells me that on April 21st, assuming nothing else happens, I'll have enough to be able to meet this 30 that's being asked for by my customer. And that means that I'll take the 24 plus some of the 10 that will be available on the 21st. And on that date, I should have the available 30. So lots of really good ways to be able to use this window, depending on the numbers of transactions that you have. Let's just see how much transactions we have for this one. Right. So I have a bunch of different purchase orders here. Some of them will be available on April 12th and some not until May 12th. So if I needed to have, 140,000 ounces, I wouldn't be able to have those until 5/12 until this second purchase order got received. But I can see all kinds of different things that this particular item brings to my attention in the available to promise window. Okay, allocations. So where can I find allocations? There's a number of different inquiries that I can look at for allocations, right? I can use the item allocation window in the inquiry section where I can see my this item, my 128 SD RAM. I can redisplay the window and I can see all the different stuff that's available. And I also have the available for allocations. I can also restrict it to a particular site at a time. Right? When I redisplay the window, I'll see only the ones that are related to that particular warehouse. I do have the ability to drill back into things, right? So I can drill back into the document numbers, the item number itself, to be able to see how those allocations are actually playing out. The other place that I like to look is my purchase receipts window. So under inquiry, if I look at receipts, let's stay with that 128 item. And when I click the looking glass to look up my sites, I also get this grid that shows me the on-hand and available quantities. So I can see multiple sites at a time like this, where I've got a whole variety of different things that I can use to see what my allocations are. I can select my north site, and then I can drill into these to see the details that are causing those allocations. So when I have allocation issues, I can use a couple of different places to see what my allocations are related to. Next on our list was the HITB. So HITB is actually a report, and it is the only report in GP that Microsoft supports as being the subledger of inventory to your general ledger. Okay, so an important factor. If you're using stock statuses or other kinds of reports, it may be fine, but the only one that Microsoft supports is this HITB. And the reason is there are actually activities or tasks that you can complete in GP that may not show up on your stock status report. So I went to inventory reports and activity, and the very last one is historical inventory trial balance. Now, there is an activation process. So if by chance you go to look for this report and you don't find it available here, then it's likely that it has not been activated in your environment yet. And again, we're happy to help you with that. Just let us know what we can do to be helpful. I can then create a option, which includes a variety of different filters. So some of the new things that we'll see is that you get to include whether there's items with zero quantity and items with zero value. Those are in newer versions of GP, which is really nice because this report gets really big. So it's nice to have those additional filters available. So I'm just going to pick the one that I already had created called demo, and we'll go ahead and generate that report. You do have the ability to do it either in detail or in summary. I rarely advise you to print this report because it gets really big. And the other thing to note is if you're looking to reconcile this to your general ledger, please be sure that all of your batches for anything inventory related have been posted before you do this. Okay. So if you've got something that's saved and it's not posted yet, it can have an impact on this report. So you'll see here in that first item, the 100 XLG, it does segment the detail by each different site ID. So I can see what quantity of things this item I have in individual sites. And I also, I'll make this a little bigger and mention to you that one of the tips for when you reconcile this or find that there may be a difference between it and your GL is typically if there's no journal entry number, it didn't post to the general ledger. Now, the only time that's different is where it was simply a transfer from one site to another. Those don't have any general ledger impacts. But often what we find when we're looking for reconciling is the journal entry number doesn't show up here, which means it posted to the HITB, but it didn't post all the way through the general ledger. And I'll show you what I use for a little Excel reconcile sheet to be able to keep track of that. Okay, and then our last one on that list was the inventory all-in-one view. So in the inquiry section, these all-in-one view options were made available earlier on in some of the other modules like purchasing and sales. There's now one for inventory, and it's slightly less useful because it's really just about quantities in, moved, and out, right? But we do have this available if you want to look up that silicone item, and you can see all of the different types of transactions, right? You can get additional information on it by clicking this down arrow, right? So you can see individual transactions, you can see the transaction numbers, and then different types, right? Receipts versus transfers, adjustments. And when you use these check boxes, you can restrict everything that are in the columns to the right of that one to only the value that you're check marking. So if I mark this box, everything to the right of that would only be related to that receipt. And I also have the ability to use some filters. So if I click on that filter, I can put this or multiple filters to be able to look for specific transactions. So if you need to drill down on individual transactions, you can do that. Okay, let's go see how we're doing on our slides. All right, so I mentioned that we were going to look at a few of the things that were new and available to you in later releases. So I've listed several of them here in this slide. 18.2 had a number of things that inventory related. So, some of them were quite elementary and really nice to have. It just took a really long time to get, like the ability to be able to go to a smart list and have the user who created or changed an item listed in the actual table for items, right? So who made that item? When did they change that item? Why did they change that item? Gives you those options for being able to ask those questions. 18.3 had a couple of good ones, like the ability to import and export your stock counts to Excel, making that a much more useful tool. Once they're output to Excel, you have the ability to just fill in the sheet instead of having the paper documents that we had previous to this release. You can exclude some inactive items on your price lists, right? Very helpful number of new features. Now, we're all the way up to 18.7 now, and we haven't had a lot of new features in inventory, but as we have all been made aware, Microsoft is working on sunsetting support, so they're not doing a lot of these. However, I do want to mention to you that you do have the ability to go create and vote on new functionality in GP. A lot of the things that they're putting into the newer releases have to do with people voting on things they want to see. So if you've got some inventory requests, be sure and go add those into that site that Microsoft has available for us. They are paying attention to it.
Andy, time for a question.
I do.
All right. So here is the question. The inventory allocation inquiry screen never shows any data at the bottom, no matter what options at the top are chosen. I have tried this on a lot of items, including ones that have, quote, allocated amounts on the ATP screen. Is there a reason for this?
Um, I would say we'd have to look into it because not off the top of my head, I don't have a reason for it. Some of the things that we would want to investigate are whether you have other plug-in products or ISV products that might be impacting that. I know that there are some manufacturing ISVs that um, do have an impact on the allocations window. They don't do allocations in the same way. So please do reach out to our tech help at lbmc.com and we'd be happy to look into it with you. Are there other
Thank you.
questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So I mentioned this smart list where you can include the ID in the master table. Couple of last things I want to mention. The reconcile to the general ledger. There are a number of different modules that you can use this window for. Now, the word reconcile can refer to a number of different places in GP. This is not the inventory reconcile that you run to fix the allocations that got stuck somewhere. This is in the financial area where you can use the reconcile to GL. Now, this particular window, as I mentioned, you can use it for different modules, right? You can use it for inventory, for purchasing, and so forth. I don't necessarily think that it gives you the most complete and accurate picture, but it is available to you if you're looking for ways to reconcile your inventory and are struggling. I certainly suggest that it's an option to you. We also then would take that HITB report, which has an ability to create a smart list for that HITB report to be able to reconcile to your general ledger as an alternative. And lastly, this is a snip of what I suggest that people do when they're using the HITB to reconcile to their general ledger. So first step, go make sure everything that you have in any inventory related modules are posted, with the exception of open sales orders. Get them all posted, look at the general ledger values, run the report to the screen and look at the HITB value and then see the variance. And after you've made some corrections, then you can see how it goes to zero. So it's an external reconciliation tool, but I can tell you that it's saved customers a few times when they do this every day, beginning of the day, end of the day, takes 5 minutes. When you can see that it's balance, 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 and then the day that it goes off, you only have one day that you have to reconcile instead of potentially a week or a month, which could take hours and days to be able to do the reconciliation. So it's something that I think is valuable to consider. It's just a little Excel sheet, and I'd be happy again to walk through the practical steps with you and make sure that you get started. And Dawn, I think you had a poll question for us.
Sure do. Thank you, Sandy. So here's the poll question. I would like to explore working with LBMC on, and the first option is upgrading your GP software. Sandy just went through a number of features that were available, hoping that you are on the most current version of the software, but we'd be happy to help you there. We also would encourage everyone, especially with the sunsetting happening down the road, to consider a business process review with our team. Eventually, there's going to have to be a move, and based on what you have and what you're used to and what you could have and what might be available to you in the future, it would be great for you to have a blueprint. And so that we have found that the business process review is a great way of creating a roadmap for you and your team. If you're not currently an LBMC client and you would like to be, and you need to or are considering a change of partner request, let's have that discussion as well, and we'll see if that makes sense. And then, as I mentioned, down the road, you may be moving to a cloud-based solution, and LBMC offers two different cloud solutions. One is the Microsoft Business Central. The other is Sage Intacct. And we'd be happy to provide you with information on those two solutions. Also, if you're interested in another cloud-based solution, it makes a lot of sense to talk to our team because we do see them out in the field, and sometimes we can provide some valuable information as you're doing your evaluation and looking at those products. So I'll give this a little bit longer, and then I'll close this down. And thanks everyone for your input on this. I'm going to end it and move back. So we can go to the next slide.
So that concludes my part, Dawn. I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about upcoming things. And I just want to say thanks very much. I always enjoy the opportunity to present on webinars and talk about things that I think are valuable to our customers. So thanks very much.
And we had an early review which said Sandy rocks. So so
Thanks.
I agree 100%. And thank you for the wonderful content that you provided today. The upcoming webinars, GP office hours that we have in August, Jason Barnes is going to be back. He presented last month, but in August, he's going to be showing us Copilot Studio and the impact that that's going to have on the future of accounting systems. It's a very exciting topic. And please know after the webinar, give me a couple of days. We'll be sending you both the recording and a copy of the slides, and they have links to all of the upcoming webinars that we talk about here. I've also put links in the chat. In September, we're going to be talking about GP power tools and specifically how you can improve the efficiency of GP administrative tasks. And in October, um, as I mentioned before, one of the cloud solutions we represent is Sage Intacct. And we're going to have one of our Sage Intacct consultants come on and show why we've moved a lot of GP clients to Sage Intacct and why they find that to be a great solution, and give you a little bit of insight into Sage Intacct. Next slide. Community Summit. October sounds so far away, but it really isn't. And if you're going, if you haven't registered yet, we've got a discount code. Please note that this can't be used in conjunction with any other discounts. But so, for example, if you were taking advantage of registering a large group, they have a discount associated with that. But if you're just doing a onesie twosie, you can use our code here to get a 10% discount on your registration. And if you're going, please mark your calendars. Sunday, October 19th at the Gaylord, which is the venue in which Community Summit is taking place. We have rented out the entire restaurant, the Moor, which is in the shape of a boat, and we'd love for you to be our guest at dinner. All we ask is that you RSVP so that we know counts and what to expect and how many bars to set up. And we would be delighted if you joined us for dinner at the Moor. And the next slide. At Community Summit, we're very proud of the fact, the expertise, the knowledge, the wonderful teaching abilities that our consultants have. And we have a number of team members who will be presenting at Community Summit. Natalie Avery is going to be doing a session on how to build a smart list that shows applied documents in GP. And then she's going to be joined by Valerie Sikora on our team. And they're going to team up to talk about optimizing administration of Dynamics GP with GP Power Tools. Jason Barnes is also going to be presenting there, building business solutions like Legos with Microsoft Power Platform. Power Platform lives up to the power in its name, and that's certain to be a great session. Sandy Wickman, to all of those of you who know how much Sandy rocks, will be doing a session that compares Dynamics BC to Dynamics GP. And I love the title of this, Calm the Anxious Accountant in You. She'll be showing you how to understand sort of the logic behind BC. It can seem a little off-putting at first, but she unravels that just beautifully in this presentation. And then our CEO and president, Brian Wilton, is going to be presenting at Community Summit, and he's going to be doing Navigation 101 Plus for Dynamics GP. And then backed by popular demand, he is going to be doing When It's Time to Purge Data in GP. So if you're going to Community Summit, we encourage you to look for these sessions and add them to your daily agenda. And with that, I'm going to check one last time. There are no questions in Q&A. There are no questions in the chat. So Sandy, thank you very much for your presentation on inventory today. And to all who attended, thank you so much for being here today. We really want to make sure that for as long as you are on GP, that you have a great experience with the solution and with the LBMC technology solutions. That's why we offer GP office hours. And we hope to see you at future events. So thanks, everyone.